we're going to get started. I'm sorry it's such a formal room. The microphones do allow us to record the audio, so we're hoping to post this presentation at a later date. So I'm happy to welcome Henry. He's our municipal coordinator of municipal law enforcement, and he's going to begin with a presentation. And then you've got staff that Henry will introduce from various departments, and we're just looking for any sort of feedback, questions, thoughts. It can be as informal as this room allows, because I recognize it's a little bit of a formal process. The microphone is there, so we're happy for you to come up and ask questions or share your thoughts at this time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Henry and we'll get going.
Good evening, members of the public. My name is Henry Bowes. I am the coordinator of municipal law enforcement, as said by Victoria. So just to kind of introduce the panel as well, just before we get started. So starting at the far end, we have Terry, our supervisor of planning, Paul Nickerson, our chief building official, Victoria Steele, our director of legislative services and /town clerk, and Walter Basic, our assistant director of planning. So tonight's presentation is on short-term rentals and B&B open house. So kind of going through the agenda here, we have first topic, why, what is the difference between short-term rentals and a bed and breakfast, frequently asked questions, and timelines and next steps. So why? So on the December 4th council meeting, council passed a resolution for staff to investigate a potential short-term bylaw with a licensing program. So this is a good thing to note in this slide, a potential. So we want to make sure that we have a feasibility of a program in the town of Grimsby. We reported back on March 4th, 2024, basically outlining our next steps through this process. So this is one of those steps, an open house, to gauge further public opinion for our report to council when we report back. So what is the difference between a short-term rental and a bed and breakfast? So a short-term rental is essentially either a whole house or whole unit being rented out for a consecutive period of less than 28 days, while a bed and breakfast, the main difference is either the owner or long-term tenant lives on the property and provides breakfast. So those are kind of your two main differences, and a bed and breakfast is rented by the room or guest rooms or beds, I should say. So common elements of a short-term bylaw and a licensing program. So some other programs may have different categories of short-term rentals. So for example, like cottage rentals, bed and breakfasts, villas, and so on and so forth. So, and then the licensing requirements may include safety standards, insurance requirements, and obviously compliance with our current zoning bylaw and regulations. So with that would also include a application process to register with the town, where a majority of that information would be required. And we would have health and safety standards in play, requiring either annual or every 2-year inspections from bylaw and fire to ensure that the property remains in a health and safety standpoint for guests and any other visitors that you may have. So with that, to ensure that neighboring properties aren't affected through this, another potential is a code of conduct for guests. So this would essentially hold the property owner accountable for any actions that occur on the property to ensure that we can hold those individuals accountable, for example, the property owner, for what occurs on their property. And then obviously enforcement, with that, it would obviously include penalties for non-compliance, revoking a license if a property becomes too much of an issue, or even using a third-party monitoring agency to potentially curb the illegal short-term rentals and have those individuals come in for a license, just so that we can do those inspections to ensure the safety standards are being met and local bylaws. So with this, we created what we call an internal project team for this. So this is kind of what our internal project team is going through and reviewing to ensure that we try to cover as much as possible. So administrative requirements, so for example, staffing, building code compliance. We have our chief building official here today. Enforcement, collection of fees through our finance department, advertising communications through communications, And another thing that council had us potentially look into is a tenant legal fund, which our legal will be taking care of in reviewing the potential for a program of that nature. So we're going to get back into our frequently asked questions. So these are also posted on our Grimsby Let's Talk page. So on there, you can kind of follow through with the exact information that I've had in this presentation, just so that you can refer back to in the future. So when will the short-term licensing program be implemented? So this is something that we're currently investigating, obviously, with an open house occurring today. The findings are intended to be presented in Q3 of 2024, so that's this year. So we will present all of our findings to council and lay out a potential program and allow council to make that decision if we as staff should move forward with that program, which would be implemented in 2025. So where are short-term rentals currently permitted in Grimsby? So as of right now, short-term rentals are not permitted within the town of Grimsby. Bed and breakfasts are permitted in the town of Grimsby. So obviously the difference there, the property owners or tenants live on site as their permanent address and provide breakfast and only rent out by the room or bed. Are sites like Airbnb and VRBO considered short-term rentals? So basically, Airbnb and VRBO are the websites that are used to facilitate short-term rentals and advertise for short-term rentals. So when people use the term Airbnbs, so Airbnb is just the website that holds the advertising in that. So the two classifications that we're kind of looking at are short-term rentals and bed and breakfast. So when people say Airbnb, that could include a bed and breakfast or a short-term rental. Airbnb is just the hosting website for advertising. Would a short-term rental licensing program impact student rentals? So this would not impact student rentals because for that period of time while they are at school, it is considered their permanent primary residence. So therefore removing that short-term rental clause. Can I rent out my condo as a short-term rental? So at the current time, no. So our zoning bylaw does not allow for this. Only bed and breakfasts are permitted within the town of Grimsby, and a condo would not be a suitable place for a bed and breakfast. Would my tenant be able to operate a bed and breakfast? So currently, yes. So essentially, if you have a long-term tenant or a long-term individual where that is their primary residence, they are permitted to run a bed and breakfast from that location. So timelines and next steps. So I'm going to start right from the beginning here. So information on public gatherings. So this kind of started on our Let's Talk Grimsby page, which you're still welcome to answer. People on that page were able to ask questions where we answered them publicly. So you're able to see all the questions and all the answers that we provided to those individuals. With that, we then created the internal project team, which consists of a lot of members up here today, but so many more members from our town hall staff here. And then as of today, we're currently hosting this public meeting to further engage with the public, to further get consultation from the residents. In August of this year, we will be launching an online survey. So this is basically, it's going to be more specific questions that'll answer either yes or no to gauge more of a target questionnaire to kind of see where the residents' concerns are and where the residents' questions are so that we can better gauge those statistics from the public. And then in October of this year, we will be presenting our findings to council, again, laying down the potential of this program and allowing council to make that decision if staff should move forward with that program in 2025. And then with that, obviously, there comes with the cost of staffing and other softwares that may be required to run a program of this nature. So we would be writing a business case for the 2025 budget, which would be going in October or November of this year. So as the chart you see in front of you, we have some of our potential options for council in front of us. These are not the only options. These are some of the potential options to come up. So just to go from left to right, we have a short-term rental bylaw with no licensing requirements. So essentially a bylaw just to manage and permit B&Bs and prohibit short-term rentals within the town of Grimsby. So this currently would mirror our current zoning bylaw. Least amount of staff time required for a program of this nature. This would be more focused on long-term housing and minimal amount of disruption to neighborhoods. So your tighter or your detached residential neighborhoods. And then going from left to right, it would be a short-term rental bylaw with no licensing requirements. But the difference here, we would be permitting B&Bs and STRs in this situation. So this would require a change to our current zoning bylaw and official plan to allow for short-term rentals to be legally permitted within the town of Grimsby. This is more tourism focused and potential for conflict between neighbors and STR owners. And next column, we have a short-term rental bylaw with a licensing requirement for B&Bs only. So this would prohibit short-term rentals within the town of Grimsby. Again, it would mirror current zoning bylaw, require more staff time for licensing and annual inspections. Again, long-term, a focus on long-term housing and minimal amount of disruption to the neighborhoods. And then the most restrictive, we have a short-term rental bylaw with licensing requirements for B&Bs and short-term rentals. So again, this would permit and license B&Bs and short-term rentals within the town of Grimsby. And again, just mirroring that comment from earlier about requiring the change to the zoning bylaw and official plan. Requires the most amount of staff time for licensing and annual inspections. And more tourism focused and a potential more of a potential conflict for neighborhoods between neighbors and STR owners. So again, just kind of going back to our Let's Talk Grimsby page, this is kind of just a snapshot of what it currently looks like. So if you have any more questions or concerns, please go and visit our Let's Talk Grimsby page, because a lot of this information is contained within that page and kind of gives you that timeline as well. So at that time, we are going to take some questions from the public. We also have our link to our Let's Talk Grimsby page right there. I think that's all that I had for you. So I'm going to leave the floor open for any questions. If you do have questions, I just ask that you come up to the mic so that everybody can hear you, and then we can have the appropriate staff member respond.